Darkness hung over the control room of the sleeper ship Resolute, a faint hum of forgotten systems whispering secrets to each other in the gloom. Captain Thane Corrigan stirred, the haze of centuries of stasis clinging to him like a bad hangover. He rubbed his eyes, which felt like two marbles left in the desert sun, and squinted at the flickering readouts. "Captain's log," he croaked, voice rough as sandpaper. "Year. Hell, I don't know. Feels like the last good cup of coffee was brewed by cavemen. The Resolute had been humanity's hopeful shot into the great unknown, a ship with more dreams than fuel, more ambition than actual sense." Thane glanced at the stasis pods lining the room, the crew stirring within like impatient popcorn kernels. "Wake up, my little space cadets," he muttered. "Time to see if the universe is as disappointing as we remember." The ship's AI, HAL 9000's less homicidal cousin, chimed in. "Good morning, Captain. It's currently year 3274. Please note, coffee supplies are at critically low levels." "Figures," Thane grumbled, stretching joints that sounded like a creaky old spaceship themselves. "What have you got for me, Hal? We're orbiting a rogue planet near the sun, Captain. Scans indicate a significant presence of unusual activity." "Unusual?" Thane raised an eyebrow, deeply suspicious. "That's a word people use when they don't want to say dangerous." The crew began to awaken, one by one. First up was Lieutenant Mara Vex, her hair a nest of static electricity, eyes sharper than laser scalpels. "Captain, you look like death warmed over." "Thanks, Vex. You always say the sweetest things." Next was Chief Engineer Cade Holt, who had the perpetually disgruntled look of a man who once bet his life savings on a sure thing, only to watch it explode. "What the hell woke us up?" he asked, tapping at his console with the urgency of a man looking for a lost winning lottery ticket. "Apparently, it's 3274, Thane said, motioning around like a tour guide at a galactic apocalypse. "Welcome to the future. Warning may contain disappointment." As the crew settled into their stations, the ship's monitors blared a symphony of alerts, each more annoying than the last. Thane slapped the console, silencing them with the authority of a man who'd had enough of everything. "Hal, give me a status update on, well, everything," Thane commanded. "The galaxy is now dominated by the Zyll'ra Consortium," HAL reported, as if commenting on the weather. "The Zyll'ra Consortium sounds like an intergalactic accounting firm." Vex rolled her eyes, leaning back in her chair. "Do they offer life insurance for getting smacked out of stasis like this?" "Only if you don't mind a premium paid in existential dread," Holt quipped, eyes glued to his console. The screens displayed a barrage of data, most of it incomprehensible but all of it bad news. Galactic maps ablaze with alien insignias, planets with names unpronounceable even by drunken poets, and a distinct lack of anything familiar. "Primitive relics, that's what they call us," Thane said, reading the most offending of messages. "I guess we always wanted to make history. Just didn't think we'd be the museum exhibits," Vex snorted. "Well, at least they didn't call us savages. Small victories, right?" "Oh, I can see it now," Thane mused sarcastically. "The primitive human exhibit. Come marvel at the species that thought an asteroid was a planet's worst enemy." "Sounds like a real winner," Holt chimed in. "Do we get to wear loincloths and grunt at passing tourists?" Thane shook his head, a half-smile on his lips despite the absurdity of it all. "First, let's figure out what these Zyll'ra characters actually want, other than laughing at our expense. Hal, open a channel." "Channel open, Captain," HAL confirmed, with a static-filled crackle for dramatic effect. The screen flickered, then filled with the image of an alien that looked like someone had tried to sculpt a squid using leftover spaghetti. Its eyes glowed with the kind of malice usually reserved for dentists and tax collectors. "Greetings, Earthlings," it said in a voice that oozed condescension like syrup on a pancake. "We are the Zyll'ra." "Captain Thane Corrigan of the Resolute," Thane replied, doing his best to sound important. "What's the galactic equivalent of not wanting to buy a timeshare?" The alien's tentacles twitched, possibly its version of a smug laugh. You are awoken in a new era, human. Adapt or face the consequences. Adapt. That's what we do best, Vex interjected, her voice laced with enough sarcasm to fuel a small star. Right after we finish not panicking. Your species is obsolete, the Zyll'ra sneered. Your only choice is to submit to our consortium or be extinguished. Wow, you guys really know how to roll out the welcome mat, Holt said dryly, arms crossed. What's next? A fruit basket with a grenade in it. Thane leaned forward, eyes narrowing. We didn't sleep for centuries just to roll over and play dead. If you think humanity's going down without a fight, you've got another thing coming. The alien's image flickered, then vanished, leaving the crew in tense, suffocating silence. Thane turned to his crew, seeing in their eyes a mixture of fear and determination. Mostly fear, but determination was lingering around, trying to look brave. "All right, team," he said, clapping his hands together. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us. And here I thought waking up was the worst part of my day," Vex sighed, already diving into the ship systems for answers. "Let's show these squid heads what old-school humans can do," Holt added, a grin pulling at the corner of his mouth. Thane nodded, feeling a spark of hope amidst the chaos. "Just remember, folks, we're not history just yet." With that, Resolute's engines hummed to life, as if sensing the crew's resolve. The ship shuddered, creaking like an ancient beast shaking off the dust of ages. Outside, the rogue planet loomed, a reminder that the universe didn't quite care about them but was willing to let them try their luck. Thane settled into his captain's chair, the weight of the years pressing down, but his spirit lighter than it had been in centuries. "Let's show the galaxy what humans are made of," he said, eyes fixed on the stars beyond. The bridge echoed with the determined clatter of the crew's work, every keystroke a defiant middle finger to the Zyll'ra consortium, every breath a promise that humanity wouldn't be so easily extinguished. "And how," Thane added with a wry grin, "bring up some music, something from the ancient files. Let's wake up the universe with a little earthling attitude." The ship filled with the rebellious strains of an old rock anthem, its defiant chords crashing against the silence of space, as the Resolute set its course for the unknown. As the song blared, Thane couldn't help but laugh. "Here's to waking up on the wrong side of the galaxy." Thane Corrigan slouched in his captain's chair, a hybrid of fatigue and defiance etched into his features like a permanent smirk. The Resolute, his home for longer than any sane person would care to admit, hummed around him, the engine's rhythm a comforting reminder that some things were still within his control. Unfortunately, the galaxy wasn't one of them. "Hal, any chance the Zyll'ra are just misunderstood philanthropists?" Thane asked, half hoping for a miracle, half expecting the usual cosmic kick in the teeth. "Inconclusive, Captain," HAL replied with a tone that suggested the AI version of a shrug. "Current evidence leans towards genocidal maniacs with a penchant for bureaucracy." "Great," Thane muttered, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Just what the universe needed, squid accountants with a murder hobby. Mara Vex shot him a look from her station. "Honestly, Thane, if those tentacled nightmares have any kindness in them, I'm a fluffy bunny." "You're more of a pissed-off porcupine," Cade Holt chimed in, tapping away at his console like he was trying to send an SOS to the gods of caffeine. "And that's being generous." "I'll take that as a compliment," Vex retorted, her fingers flying over the control panel with the grace of someone who didn't know the meaning of quit. The ship's monitors continued their relentless display of data, each symbol and number a stark reminder of how little they understood about the universe they had awakened into. The galaxy had moved on without them, evolving like a teenager who had grown 3 inches and sprouted acne, both confusing and a little terrifying. "Hal, give me the cliff notes on what humanity missed," Thane said, settling deeper into his seat, bracing himself for a deluge of depressing updates. "Humanity has become a fringe species, Captain," HAL began, with all the bedside manner of a saw blade. "The Zyll'ra consortium has absorbed over 70% of known territories, Remaining human colonies mostly exist at the periphery of Zyll'ra interest. Alliances are unstable, and resources are heavily contested. Ah, so nothing's changed, Thane said with a grim smile. We're still scraping for leftovers at the universe's dumpster. A blinking alert caught Vex's attention, her brow furrowing as she read the incoming signal. Captain, I'm picking up a distress call. It's human. What's left of it anyway? Thane raised an eyebrow. Fantastic. Let's add rescue mission to our list of terrible ideas. Hal, patch it through. Static crackled, then a voice emerged, ragged and weary. This is the colony of Barren Reach, under threat. Zyll'ra, need assistance. Anyone out there? The message repeated, looping like a broken record from hell. Barren Reach, Holt snorted. Someone's got a sense of humor, or a keen understanding of their real estate, Thane replied, leaning forward, the distress call ringing in his ears like a siren. Vex, plot a course. We're going to see just how barren this reach really is. On it, Captain, Vex said, her hands a blur over the controls. Holt shook his head, rolling his eyes. This sounds like a suicide mission wrapped in a death wish, sprinkled with a side of insanity. That's the spirit, Thane said, clapping him on the back. Besides, what else are we going to do? Perfect our twiddling thumbs technique. I'm already a black belt, Holt smirked, though his eyes betrayed the worry gnawing at his gut. As the Resolute shifted course, the rogue planet below shrank in the rear view, a forgotten boulder in the cosmic stream. The prospect of facing the Zyll'ra was daunting, but sitting around waiting for the universe to kick them in the shins held no appeal either. Hal, what's the ETA? Thane asked, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the armrest. Approximately 4 hours, Captain, HAL replied smoothly. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. More like strap in and try not to scream, Vex muttered under her breath. The bridge fell into a tense silence, each crew member lost in their own thoughts, wrestling with fears both rational and absurd. The galaxy was a different beast now, and they were the unwelcome guests crashing its party. So, Holt began, breaking the quiet, anyone want to place bets on what kind of welcome party the Zyll'ra have for us? Doesn't matter as long as they serve drinks, Thane quipped, though his voice carried an edge that hadn't been there earlier. Preferably something strong enough to make us forget we tried to play hero. Cheap booze and expensive regrets, Vex nodded. Story of my life. Hours crawled by, marked only by the occasional alert and the steady ticking of the ship's chronometer. The Resolute hurtled through the void, the crew's anticipation growing with every mile crossed. Finally, HAL spoke, cutting through their thoughts like a knife. Approaching Barren Reach, Captain. Scanners indicate multiple hostile signatures in orbit. Lovely, Thane said, exhaling a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Let's make a memorable entrance. The Resolute shuddered, thrusters flaring as they approached the besieged colony. The view through the main display was a mess of chaos, ships darting like angry hornets, debris spinning lazily from recent skirmishes, and the planet itself a mottled sphere of gray and brown. Definitely doesn't look like a vacation spot, Holt observed, squinting at the screen. Unless your idea of a good time involves getting shot at, Vex added, her eyes scanning the readouts for a viable approach. Hal, open a channel to the colony, Thane ordered, straightening as the channel crackled open. This is Captain Thane Corrigan of the sleeper ship Resolute, he said, his voice steady despite the ridiculousness of the situation. We're here to help. What's your status? The response was immediate, a mix of relief and desperation. Captain Corrigan, this is Administrator Lex from Barren Reach. We're under heavy attack, defenses failing. Any assistance would be greatly appreciated. Appreciated, sure, Thane muttered to himself. Surviving would be even better. Hang tight, Lex, he said, louder this time. We're coming in hot. Tell your folks to keep their heads down. Copy that, Resolute. We'll do our best. The channel closed and Thane took a deep breath, staring at the chaos unfolding on the screen. All right, team, let's see how much trouble we can stir up. With a nod to Vex, he added, light him up. The Resolute plunged into the fray, guns blazing with the enthusiasm of a drunk uncle at a family reunion. The Zyll'ra ships responded in kind, their sleek designs betraying a lethal elegance that sent a shiver down Thane's spine. "Watch the flanks," Vex barked, her fingers a blur across the controls. "They're faster than they look." "Not fast enough," Holt grinned, unleashing a barrage that sent one enemy ship spiraling into oblivion. But for every Zyll'ra they felled, 3 more seemed to take its place, the odds stacking like a rigged deck. The noise of battle filled the bridge, a cacophony of alarms and shouted commands. "Captain, we can't keep this up much longer," Vex warned, sweat beading on her brow. "Shields are failing and our ammo isn't infinite." "I know," Thane said, frustration gnawing at his patience. "But we can't just bail. There's a colony down there counting on us." In that moment, the ship's comm crackled to life once more, Administrator Lex's voice cutting through the chaos. "Resolute, we've managed to rally some of our defense drones. We'll try to draw their fire. If you see an opening, take it. They better be damned good drones," Holt grumbled, focusing intently on his console. The drones flitted into view, engaging the Zyll'ra ships with desperate tenacity. The distraction worked, if only for a heartbeat, but sometimes a heartbeat was all it took. "There's our window," Thane said, pointing to a gap in the enemy formation. "Vex, hit it." The Resolute surged forward, engines roaring in protest as they made a break for the surface. Fire raked across their hull, the ship shuddering under the assault but refusing to give in. They broke through the atmosphere, barren reaches, bleak landscape sprawling out below them like a bad memory. Smoke rose from the colony, its structures battered but standing, a testament to stubborn survival. "Hal, get me a landing zone," Thane ordered, scanning for a safe place to touch down. "Coordinates locked, Captain," HAL replied with the calm of someone completely detached from the chaos. The Resolute descended, landing with a bone-jarring thud that left everyone breathless. Thane unbuckled, rising with a groan. "All right, folks. Time to stretch our legs." Vex and Holt followed suit, their expressions grim but determined. "And remember," Thane added with a sardonic grin, "play nice with the locals. We might need them if we survive this." They exited the ship into a world that reeked of smoke and fear, the air thick with the tang of burning metal and desperation. Colonists, harried and exhausted, moved with the weary determination of those who had no choice but to keep fighting. Administrator Lex approached, looking like he'd aged a decade since their last communication. "Captain Corrigan, thank you for—" "Don't thank us yet," Thane interrupted, surveying the chaos. "Let's make sure there's still a colony to save." Lex nodded, eyes hardening with resolve. "The Zyll'ra won't stop until they've taken everything. We're all that's left in this sector. Then we'll make sure they choke on it," Vex said, her voice a low growl. Plans were made, defenses shored up, and a grim determination settled over the ragtag alliance of colonists and Resolute crew. Night fell, but the light of burning wreckage kept the dark at bay. Thane stood with his crew, the weight of the galaxy pressing down, but a spark of hope flickering stubbornly in his chest. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and probably out of their minds, but they were here, and they wouldn't go quietly. "Let's show these squid bastards what happens when you back a human into a corner," Thane said, the fire in his eyes mirrored by his crew. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble with stakes higher than any card game in existence. But if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was screwing up the odds. Thane scratched his head, staring at the grim tableau of barren reach. The colony looked like it was designed by someone who thought the phrase post-apocalyptic chic was a compliment. Buildings leaned at precarious angles, their metal hides scarred and pockmarked from countless assaults. Colonists scurried between them like mice in a maze, desperately trying to patch up the leaks in their sinking ship of a settlement. "Well," Thane muttered, "at least they didn't oversell the place." Vex adjusted her gear with a kind of grim determination. "Looks like a fixer-upper with a side of total hopelessness." Cade Holt, never one to pass up on a chance to be sardonic, chimed in. "Hey, they say a place is what you make of it. Guess these folks decided on Stalingrad in space as their aesthetic. Administrator Lex, looking like a man who's long since accepted his fate of being the universe's punching bag, waved them over. Captain Corrigan, we need to get to the command center. It's not much, but it's where we try to keep track of how badly we're losing. Thane nodded, motioning for his crew to follow. Let's have a look then. God knows sitting around waiting to die isn't on my bucket list. The command center was a hub of frantic activity, a chaotic symphony of blinking lights and beeping consoles. Lex introduced them to his motley collection of staff, each one wearing the same haunted expression that suggested they hadn't had a good night's sleep since the last millennia. "All right, everyone," Thane said, clapping his hands together with false cheer. "Let's talk about how we turn this little slice of inferno into something resembling a defensible position." Lex pointed at the holographic display in the center of the room, which showed a 3D map of the colony. Red blips, representing Zyll'ra forces, pulled an impressive impression of an impending doom. "We've got limited resources and even more limited time. But we're not dead yet, and I'd like to keep it that way." "Sounds like you've been reading my autobiography," Holt said, leaning over to get a closer look at the map. "Thane," Vex said, pointing to a cluster of buildings near the colony's perimeter, "what about using these as choke points? Funnel the Zyll'ra into narrow areas where we can hit them harder." Thane grinned. "Now there's the kind of suicidal optimism I can get behind. Lex, think your folks can rig some surprises?" Lex nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "We've got a few tricks up our sleeves, explosive tricks mostly. Note to self, never play cards with barren reach colonists," Cade said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "All right," Thane said, warming to the plan. "We give them a roadshow they'll remember. Get your people on it, Lex, and we'll back you up." As they hashed out the details, Thane couldn't help but feel a surge of grim satisfaction. They were outmatched and outgunned, but they had one thing the Zyll'ra didn't: the unyielding human capacity for creative chaos. "Captain," HAL voice crackled over his earpiece, "I've taken the liberty of performing a tactical analysis. Statistically, your odds are not in your favor." "Thanks, Hal," Thane replied dryly. "I'll remember that when I'm rioting my will." Vex, rolling her eyes, nudged Thane. "We should get our stuff prepped. If we're going to do this, we need to be ready to move fast." Thane nodded, turning back to Lex. "We'll coordinate with you from the field. Time to see if we can turn these odds around." As they left the command center, the atmosphere outside seemed to crackle with tension, the sense of an impending storm hanging over the colony. "Feels like we're the last act in a really bad play," Holt commented, hefting his rifle. "Maybe," Thane replied, checking his gear. "But we aim to make it the most memorable act." They headed to one of the makeshift barricades near the perimeter, where a handful of colonists were fortifying positions with the desperate enthusiasm of people who knew the end was near but were damned if they'd make it easy. "So, what do you think the Zyll'ra's problem is?" Cade asked, as they settled in behind the barricades. "Probably the same problem everyone seems to have with us," Thane replied, peering through a pair of binoculars at the approaching Zyll'ra forces. "We exist, and we're in the way." "Always been good at that," Vex added, grinning despite herself. "Existing obnoxiously." The Zyll'ra ships hovered ominously on the horizon, a dark swarm of doom that would have sent lesser beings scurrying for cover. But these weren't lesser beings. They were humans, and humans had a knack for being downright annoying when they wanted to be. "Here they come," Thane said, his voice steady. The first wave hit, a screaming horde of Zyll'ra foot soldiers and drones that surged towards the barricades like a tidal wave of alien anger. The colonists responded with a barrage of firepower that belied their ragtag appearance. Thane and his crew were in the thick of it, their adrenaline fueled by the knowledge that this was their last stand. The air was filled with the roar of weapons, the screams of combat, and the occasional explosion that sent shockwaves through their bones. "Watch your six," Vex shouted, dropping a drone with a well-placed shot. "I've got it covered," Holt replied, dispatching another with a casual flick of his wrist. I swear these things are getting uglier every year. Sweat dripped into Thane's eyes as he reloaded, his pulse pounding in his ears. There was something exhilarating about the chaos, a kind of reckless abandon that he hadn't felt in years. This was it, the culmination of everything they'd faced, everything they'd fought for. Captain, HAL voice broke through the cacophony, the colony's defenses are failing. You need to fall back. Not yet, Thane growled, his determination mingling with the fire in his veins. But even as they fought, the Zyll'ra forces continued to press forward, their sheer numbers overwhelming. One by one the barricades fell, the colonists retreating in the face of the onslaught. Time to pull back, Vex said, her voice laced with regret. We're not going to win this one. Thane nodded reluctantly, knowing she was right. All units fall back to the command center. We'll make our stand there. They retreated, fighting every step of the way, the ground littered with debris and the bodies of the fallen. The colony was burning, its buildings reduced to charred skeletons that stood as silent witnesses to their struggle. In the command center, Lex and his staff were coordinating the retreat, their expressions grim but resolute. We're down to our last line of defense, Lex said as they arrived. Then let's make it count, Thane replied, readying himself for the final act. They set up their positions, the command center now a fortress against the Zyll'ra tide. The colonists and Thane's crew lined the barricades, their faces set in determination. Captain, HAL voice came again, a note of urgency in its usually calm tone. I have detected a potential vulnerability in the Zyll'ra formation. If exploited, it could buy you crucial time. Let's hear it, Thane replied, hope flickering in his chest. HAL outlined the plan with a precision that was almost clinical, the details forming a picture of desperate ingenuity. Thane listened, and as the pieces fell into place, he realized they might just have a chance. All right, people, he said, turning to his crew and the colonists. We've got a plan, and it's a long shot, but it's better than rolling over and dying. The plan was simple in its madness, a counterattack that would exploit a gap in the Zyll'ra lines, a maneuver that required precision and a hell of a lot of luck. They prepared for the final push, their resolve steeling against the odds. As the Zyll'ra forces closed in, Thane felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. Whatever happens, he said, looking at Vex and Holt, it's been an honor. Vex grinned, her eyes alight with fierce determination. Let's give them hell. The attack was brutal and chaotic, a desperate attempt to turn the tide against the Zyll'ra. They hit hard and fast, moving like a well-oiled machine despite the odds. Time seemed to stretch, each moment an eternity as they fought with the grim determination of people who had nothing left to lose. And slowly, against all odds, they began to push the Zyll'ra back. The tide was turning, but victory was still a distant dream. They just had to hold out a little longer, to keep fighting with everything they had. Captain, HAL voice broke through the chaos. The Zyll'ra are regrouping. They're sending in reinforcements. Thane's heart sank, but he refused to give up. We just need to keep at it. Show them we're not done yet. The battle raged on, a symphony of violence and defiance. And through it all, Thane and his crew fought with the kind of reckless courage that only humans could muster. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about standing up and refusing to back down, about showing the galaxy that humanity was still here, still fighting, still unyielding. And in that moment, as the Zyll'ra pressed their attack, Thane knew that whatever happened, they had already won in the ways that mattered most. As the command center buzzed with frantic activity, the air thick with the stench of desperation and too many people who hadn't showered in days, Thane found himself grateful for the small things. Like the fact he still had a pulse, though he suspected that might be more of a temporary loan than a permanent possession. We're holding them for now, Lex announced, although his face looked like it was carved from worry itself. The holographic map was a sea of red blips, making it look like the board from a really unfair game of Space Invaders. Define holding, Thane shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like we're one bad day away from being a cautionary tale. Lex gave a weary smile. Well, hold your horses, Captain. We might get to be a cautionary tale after all. Cade, leaning against a console with the relaxed air of someone who's not entirely sure they're not dreaming, chimed in. You know, they say red is a bold color choice. Really screams alien invasion. Right, Mara Vex said, her eyes scanning the map like she was hoping it would spontaneously combust. But I think I'd prefer beige. Much less end of the world. Amidst this pleasant chit-chat, HAL chimed in with its usual delightful lack of tact. Captain, the Zyll'ra forces are deploying something new. Analysis suggests they plan to assimilate the colony rather than outright destroy it. Thane raised an eyebrow. Assimilate. I don't recall signing up for that type of corporate merger. Like we're going to let them, Vex muttered, her expression a mix of determination, and I really should have stayed in bed today. Before Thane could elaborate on how much he agreed, the door to the command center burst open. A small group of colonists stormed in, led by someone who looked like they'd been chewing on a particularly sour lemon for most of their life. Captain Corrigan, the apparent leader snapped, we need to talk. Can it wait? Thane asked, gesturing to the map. We're a little busy with, not dying. That's exactly what we need to talk about, the lemon chewer insisted. Some of us think this stand against the Zyll'ra is madness. We should negotiate. Thane exchanged a "you've got to be kidding me" look with Vex. Negotiate? With the Zyll'ra? That sounds about as promising as a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. It's better than dying, the colonist protested. Is it though? Cade interjected, with the kind of philosophical insight only a man who regularly wagers food rations on the outcomes of life-threatening situations could muster. Listen, Thane said, trying to keep his patience from evaporating. The Zyll'ra don't negotiate. They don't even do customer complaints. They're more of a take over and eradicate type of species. The colonist leader looked ready to argue, but Lex cut in. We don't have time for this. The Zyll'ra won't stop until they've either absorbed us into their ranks or wiped us out, and my money's on the latter. HAL added unhelpfully. Statistics show a 99.7% likelihood of annihilation if current trends continue. See, even HAL agrees, Thane said, pointing at the map. And HAL isn't exactly known for its optimism. The colonists muttered amongst themselves, clearly unconvinced but uncertain of their next move. Thane felt a headache brewing, the kind that starts in your brain and eventually spreads to your soul. Look, he said, his tone softening, I get it. You're scared. We're all scared. But right now, we're all that's standing between the Zyll'ra and complete human extinction. So let's focus on surviving today, and if we manage that, we'll argue about the finer points of diplomacy tomorrow. The colonist leader hesitated, then nodded grudgingly. All right, but we're counting on you, Captain. No pressure then, Thane said dryly, turning back to his crew. All right, people, let's get back to what we do best. And what's that? Vex asked, a wry smile on her lips. Annoying the hell out of our enemies, Thane replied, picking up his rifle. They prepared for the next wave, the tension in the air so thick you could slice it with a knife, or perhaps a Zyll'ra energy blade, which was even less comforting. As Thane settled in at the barricades, he felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him, a constant reminder that humans were nothing if not stubbornly persistent. Here comes the next wave, Vex called out, squinting at the horizon where the Zyll'ra forces were gathering like a cloud of very angry, very well-armed locusts. Great, Thane replied, adjusting his grip on his rifle. I've always wanted to be outnumbered 2-1, really gets the blood pumping. Thought you said we were outnumbered 3-1, Cade commented, glancing over. Somebody ate one of them, Thane retorted without missing a beat, a flicker of gallows humor lighting his eyes. The Zyll'ra attack was swift and brutal, their tactics designed to overwhelm through sheer force of numbers. But Barren Reach wasn't just any colony, and Thane's crew weren't just any defenders. They hit back with a ferocity born of desperation and a healthy disregard for their own safety. The air filled with the cacophony of battle, explosions, gunfire, the unearthly screeches of the Zyll'ra. Thane fought like a man possessed, his mind a singular focus on survival. He could feel the weight of each shot, each decision, like the tolling of a clock counting down their last moments. And yet, in the midst of chaos, there was a strange sense of camaraderie. They were all in this together, bound by the shared knowledge that they were probably screwed but determined to give the universe the middle finger on the way out. "Captain," HAL voice crackled over the comms, "the Zyll'ra are attempting to breach the command center. They've deployed a new type of drone. Probably going to offer us a coupon for assimilation," Thane muttered, taking aim at an oncoming Zyll'ra soldier. "Just what I've always wanted," Vex said, her voice cutting through the din of battle. "A join us or die discount." As the battle raged on, the new drones made their presence known. Sleeker and faster than the others, they moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic. Unfortunately, their weapons weren't nearly as charming. "Those things are new," Cade commented, eyeing the drones with what might have been admiration if they weren't actively trying to kill him. "Yeah," Thane replied, firing off a shot that took one of the drones down. "And I already hate them." The colonists were holding their ground, but it was clear the Zyll'ra were playing a long game. They weren't just trying to destroy the colony. They were aiming to break it, to grind it down like sandpaper until nothing was left but dust. "We're going to need a miracle," Vex said, reloading her weapon. "And a miracle worker," Holt added, his tone grim. "Well, let's just hope the universe is feeling generous today," Thane quipped, scanning the battlefield for any signs of a turning point. It was then that Lex's voice came through the comms, hurried and breathless. "Captain, I've got an idea." "I'm all ears," Thane replied, ducking as a bolt of energy sizzled overhead. "We can't win this if things stay as they are," Lex said. "But if we can disrupt their command structure, target their leadership." "You mean take off the head of the snake," Thane finished, catching on. "Not a bad idea, Lex." "But easier said than done." Lex didn't disagree. "There's a Zyll'ra command ship hovering just outside the colony's perimeter. If we can get a team aboard, maybe we can sabotage their operations." "Just need to get past a few thousand homicidal aliens," Vex chimed in. "Piece of cake." "Got any of that cake left?" Cade asked, his rifle spitting fire. Thane considered the plan, weighing the risks against the dwindling options. It was dangerous, bordering on suicidal, but then again, so was everything else they'd done today. "All right," Thane said, a plan forming in his mind. "Lex, get me everything you've got on that command ship. We're going snake hunting." "And here I thought we were the underdogs," Cade remarked. "We are," Thane replied, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "But we're the underdogs who bite back." The plan was hastily formed but had the kind of reckless audacity that humanity was known for. Thane would lead a small team to infiltrate the Zyll'ra command ship, relying on speed, surprise, and a touch of insanity. As they prepared for the mission, Thane could feel the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was their last chance to turn the tide, their one shot at making a difference. He glanced at his crew, feeling a swell of pride at their determination, their refusal to back down. "Whatever happens," he said, looking each of them in the eye, "let's make sure it's something the Zyll'ra will remember." With that, they set out into the chaos once more, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them on the path to survival. Thane Corrigan adjusted his grip on the rifle, the cool metal grounding him. The odds were as shitty as ever, but that was no reason to lose his sense of humor, or his life, for that matter. "Captain," HAL voice echoed in his ear, the AI tone as dry as the last packet of instant coffee aboard the Resolute. "The Zyll'ra forces are regrouping for another assault. Estimated arrival, 3 minutes. Good to know punctuality's still a thing in intergalactic warfare," Thane muttered. He scanned the ragtag group of colonists and crew. No one looked particularly thrilled, but no one looked ready to throw in the towel either. It was comforting in a masochistic sort of way. Mara Vex sidled up alongside him, her expression hovering between determination and I need a vacation. So, Captain, what's the plan? Dying heroically or living shamelessly? Heroically's a bit dramatic for my taste, Thane replied, eyes still on the approaching horde of pissed-off aliens. But living shamelessly, now that's my kind of weekend. Vex chuckled, although it sounded more like a grim cough. What a time to run out of tequila. Cade Holt popped up from a nearby barricade, expression as relaxed as if he were watching a mildly interesting holo-vid rather than facing imminent death. You know, I once bet a week's rations that the Zyll'ra would have better taste in architecture. I think this counts as losing. Zyll'ra aesthetics aside, Thane replied, I'm betting it's us they'll want to redecorate next. Administrator Lex, looking like he'd wrestled a series of bad decisions and lost, arrived with an update. Captain, the colonists are ready, but morale's, well, let's say it's less inspired and more resigned. We could really use a miracle, Thane sighed, feeling the weight of a universe that seemed perpetually against them. Miracles are for the pious, Lex. We're all about the Hail Marys and sheer bloody-mindedness. A flicker of movement caught his eye. The Zyll'ra forces were advancing, their precision almost beautiful in a we're-all-going-to-die kind of way. Thane adjusted his stance, ready for the impending chaos. Vex, you take left flank. Cade, right. Lex, keep those colonists from panicking. Last thing we need is a stampede. And you? Vex asked, already moving into position. I'll be here doing my best impression of a ragged hero. He flashed a grin that felt more like a grimace. The Zyll'ra descended on them like an omnipotent wave, part tsunami, part apocalypse. The air filled with the cacophony of energy blasts and the cries of war. This was it, the moment where desperation met destiny on a battlefield of broken dreams and stubborn bastards. Remember, Thane shouted over the din, we're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting because that's what we do, we're stubborn like that. A Zyll'ra drone whizzed past, narrowly missing his head. And because they want to turn us into their latest acquisition, he added, shooting down the drone with a quick burst. Captain, HAL voice broke through the chaos, enemy forces have increased aggression by 23%, suggest immediate tactical retreat. Thane considered the AI suggestion for a split second. Hal, if I wanted your advice, I'd ask for it. Let's focus on not dying, all right. Understood, HAL replied, a hint of what might be robotic exasperation in its tone. The battle was fierce, brutal, and totally one-sided. Human resilience versus alien efficiency was a tale as old as time, or at least as old as this miserable century. But something remarkable happened amidst the chaos. The colonists, initially hesitant, found their footing. They fought back with a ferocity that screamed, we're not done yet. Captain, Vex's voice crackled through the comms, I'm seeing movement on the horizon. Reinforcements. Thane squinted through the haze of battle. Reinforcements, please. More like a final screw you from the universe. The Zyll'ra's advance slowed, but Thane knew better than to hope. Hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. Still, the brief respite was enough for him to regroup to assess the damage. Cade sidled up, breathless but grinning like a lunatic. Well, Captain, we're not dead yet. I call that a win. Keep celebrating and the universe might just take you up on that, Thane shot back, but there was no bite in his words. He turned to the colonists, who were reloading and tending to the wounded. They were scared but resolute, a testament to humanity's knack for enduring the impossible. Captain, Lex's voice was a lifeline amid the sea of chaos, we need to regroup. The command center's holding, but not for long. Noted, Thane replied, his mind racing. They couldn't hold the line forever. The Zyll'ra were relentless, like a bad rash that just wouldn't quit. Vex joined them, looking worse for wear but eyes alight with a fire that screamed defiance. We're running out of time, Captain. It's now or never. Thane nodded. They needed a plan, and fast. Something that would turn the tide, or at least delay the inevitable. He flicked a glance at HAL holographic map, a sea of red blips that represented the Zyll'ra forces closing in. Okay, he said, his voice carrying over the cacophony, we're going to hit them where it hurts. We'll take out their command structure, cut off the snake's head, and maybe, just maybe, we'll live to fight another day." The crew looked at him, eyes filled with a mix of skepticism and hope. It was a crazy plan, but so was fighting genocidal aliens with half a coffee ration. "Lex, get me intel on that command ship." "Vex, Cade, you're with me. We've got a snake to behead." "Finally, something interesting," Cade quipped, checking his gear with a nonchalance that bordered on insanity. Vex grinned, a feral glint in her eyes. "Let's show them what human ingenuity looks like. Spoiler alert, it's not pretty." As they prepared to launch their last-ditch effort, Thane took a moment to absorb the scene. The battered colony, the determined faces, the grim reality of it all. This was what they were fighting for, not just survival, but to prove that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night. The command ship was a behemoth, looming ominously over the battlefield like a vengeful god. Getting aboard would be a challenge, but challenges were par for the course in this line of work. "Hal," Thane called, "we're going to need a distraction, something big, bright, and loud." "Understood, Captain. Initiating distraction protocol." A series of explosions lit up the sky, a dazzling display of pyrotechnics that would have made any fireworks enthusiast proud. The Zyll'ra, momentarily distracted, shifted their focus. "Now!" Thane shouted, leading the charge towards the command ship. The path was treacherous, a gauntlet of enemies and obstacles that seemed determined to thwart their every move. But Thane and his team pushed forward, driven by a mix of adrenaline, desperation, and sheer bloody-mindedness. They reached the ship's access point, Vex making quick work of the security panel with a flourish that suggested she'd done this before, likely on less hostile ships. "After you, Captain," she said, gesturing to the now open hatch. "How polite," Thane replied, slipping inside with a cautious glance. The interior was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Clean, sterile, and humming with technological superiority. It was almost insulting. "Reminds me of my last visit to a dentist," Cade commented, eyeing the pristine corridors with distaste. "Let's hope the Zyll'ra are as scared of us as I am of dentists," Thane replied, moving forward with purpose. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors, each turn bringing them closer to their target. The command center was their goal, the nerve center of the Zyll'ra operation. Taking it out would be a blow they couldn't recover from, at least not quickly. "Captain," Lex's voice crackled through the comm, "I've uploaded schematics to your HUD. The command center is 3 levels up, heavily guarded." "Of course it is," Thane muttered. "Wouldn't be a challenge otherwise." They moved with a precision born of necessity, each step calculated, each breath measured. The Zyll'ra presence was thin here, most of their forces concentrated outside, but that didn't mean they were safe. "Contact," Vex warned as they rounded a corner, coming face to face with a squad of Zyll'ra. "Just our luck," Cade deadpanned, raising his weapon. The ensuing firefight was brutal and swift, the kind that left no room for second chances or regrets. It was kill or be killed, and Thane had no intention of dying today. When the dust settled, they continued their march, the path ahead clearer but no less daunting. The command center loomed, a fortress within a fortress and a reminder of the stakes at hand. "Captain," HAL voice was a beacon amidst the chaos. "Security protocols are tightening. Recommend haste." "Would you stop recommending and start helping?" Thane snapped, the strain of battle fraying his nerves. "Activating auxiliary systems. Expect temporary power fluctuations." The lights flickered, the ship shuddering as HAL worked its magic. It was a small victory, but in this war they'd take what they could get. "Let's move," Thane urged, leading the charge into the command center. The room was a hive of activity, Zyll'ra officers scrambling to respond to the unexpected breach. It was the perfect opportunity, the kind of chaos that could turn the tide. "Vex, take out their comms. Cade, cover us." The battle raged, an intimate, vicious affair where every move counted. Thane fought like a man with nothing left to lose, each shot a reminder of why they were here. As Vex worked her magic, disabling systems with a deftness that bordered on artistry, Thane could feel the shift. The Zyll'ra were reeling, their commands faltering. Captain, Lex's voice broke through the haze of battle. They're losing coordination. It's working. For the first time, hope dared to show its face, a hesitant flicker amidst the darkness. They were making progress, slow and steady like a glacier with attitude. The battle was far from over, but Thane allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They were here, fighting back, and in this bleak corner of space, that was enough. Looks like they'll have to cancel the assimilation party, Cade quipped, dispatching another Zyll'ra with a casual ease. Yeah, Thane replied, a weary grin on his lips, and we're just getting started. With the command center compromised, the Zyll'ra forces outside began to falter, their momentum breaking like a wave against an unyielding shore. It was a small victory, but one they desperately needed. Thane surveyed the scene, the remnants of battle, the weary but determined faces of his crew. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they'd bought themselves time, and in this war, that was the most valuable currency. Let's finish this, he said, rallying his team for the next phase of their impossible mission. As they prepared to push forward, Thane couldn't help but feel a spark of optimism, buried deep beneath layers of cynicism and doubt. Maybe, just maybe, they'd get out of this mess alive. And if they didn't, well, at least they'd go out fighting, just the way they liked it. The Resolute's makeshift war room smelled like sweat and desperation, a scent that could probably be bottled and sold to masochists. Thane Corrigan stood hunched over a holographic display with a frown that could sigh your milk. The Zyll'ra forces blinked ominously on the map, a sea of red encroaching on their pitiful island of resistance. But there was something else, a thread of hope hidden beneath layers of cynicism. "All right, folks," Thane said, addressing the room with the enthusiasm of a man about to tell his crew their favorite bar was out of beer. "Seems we've got a potential ace up our sleeves." Cade Holt, leaning casually against a bulkhead as if they weren't teetering on the brink of annihilation, raised an eyebrow. "An ace, huh? I thought we were playing a losing hand of solitaire." "Turns out," Thane continued, ignoring Cade's skepticism, "the Zyll'ra's tech relies on subspace frequencies. We mess with those frequencies, we mess with them. Could knock their systems offline long enough for us to do some real damage." Mara Vex snorted, arms crossed and a smirk hovering on her lips. "And let me guess, the downside is it's damn near suicidal." "Pretty much," Thane admitted. "But when has that ever stopped us?" The room was silent except for the low hum of the ship's systems, each crew member weighing the choice between possible death and certain defeat. They'd been dancing on the edge for so long, they might as well have been married to it. Lex, the beleaguered administrator with a permanent worried furrow on his brow, leaned in. "What exactly do we need to pull this off?" "Coordination, grit, and just the right amount of madness," Thane replied. "We've got to deploy jamming beacons at strategic points. That means getting close enough to tickle their defenses without getting obliterated." Cade raised a hand. "Does this plan come with a money-back guarantee?" "Only if you believe in afterlife refunds," Thane shot back, earning a chuckle from Vex. "Hal," Thane called, addressing the ship's AI who had the personality of a bored librarian, "you got anything to add?" "Aside from the statistical improbability of success, no," HAL replied with dry indifference. "However, should the plan succeed, it would indeed disrupt their operational capabilities." "The AI equivalent of a ringing endorsement," Vex said, rolling her eyes. "All right, team," Thane said, rubbing his hands together like a cat burglar about to crack a safe. "We've got our work cut out for us. Vex, you're on beacon deployment. Cade, you're our distraction artist. I'll coordinate from here." "Because sitting safely behind enemy lines is such a hardship," Cade quipped with a grin. The crew dispersed, each grappling with their role in this reckless venture. They were veterans of 100 bad ideas, but this one might just take the cake, set it on fire, and throw it at the enemy. As they suited up, Thane stole a moment to himself, staring out into the void of space. It was vast, indifferent, and not a little bit terrifying, much like his last relationship. "Time to be heroes," he muttered. "Or at least die trying." Vex moved through the winding corridors of the Resolute with the stealth of a cat on a hot tin roof. In one hand she carried the jamming beacon, a device cobbled together from spare parts and the blood, sweat, and tears of desperate engineers. "Got your 6, Vex," Cade's voice crackled over the comms. "If you get vaporized, just let me know." "Thanks, Cade." "Your confidence is overwhelming," she replied, navigating past rows of stasis pods that had seen better days. The airlock loomed ahead, a gateway to the hostile world outside. Vex took a deep breath, bracing herself for the zero-G ballet that awaited her. "Deploying in 3, 2, 1, she whispered, launching herself into the void. Space was silent, a mute witness to the chaos and carnage of battle. Vex maneuvered with practiced ease, heading for her target, a Zyll'ra relay station hanging in the black like an unwelcome houseguest. "Cade, you're up," she said, setting the beacon in place with a satisfying click. "Firing up the fireworks," came Cade's reply, as a series of explosions erupted in the distance, a dazzling display of destruction that drew Zyll'ra attention like moths to a particularly suicidal flame. The distraction worked, diverting enemy forces long enough for Vex to arm the beacon. Its signal pulsed, an invisible wave that rippled through the fabric of subspace, and for a moment, Vex almost believed they could pull this off. "Beacon active," she reported, pushing back towards the ship. "Let's see if the Zyll'ra like having their toys broken." Back on the Resolute, Thane watched the unfolding chaos with grim satisfaction. The holographic display showed Zyll'ra ships faltering, systems hiccuping like they'd swallowed a wasp. "Hal, give me status," Thane ordered, his heart pounding like a war drum. "Disruption spreading through Zyll'ra ranks," HAL confirmed. "Their coordination is degrading faster than human diplomacy." "Ha, take that, you bureaucratic bastards," Thane muttered under his breath. Lex appeared at Thane's side, hope flickering in his weary eyes. "It's working. They're losing cohesion." "Don't break out the champagne just yet," Thane warned. "We've still got work to do." The next phase of their plan involved taking advantage of the confusion to launch a counteroffensive, a last, desperate bid to tilt the scales in humanity's favor. "All right, crew," Thane barked into the comms, "prepare for Phase 2. We hit them hard and fast while they're still reeling." The colony's defenders rallied, ready to dive headfirst into the fray. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that even in the darkest corners of the universe, humanity could still pack a punch. "Vex, Cade, you clear on your targets?" Thane asked, pulling up tactical layouts. "Crystal," Vex replied. "I'm ready to make some noise." "You mean more noise," Cade corrected. "Subtlety isn't exactly our style. Just get it done," Thane instructed, "and come back in one piece." Outside, the battle resumed with renewed vigor, human forces exploiting the gaps in Zyll'ra defenses like thieves in the night. The colony fought with a tenacity that belied their dwindling numbers, each victory a grim reminder of what they stood to lose. Thane coordinated from the bridge, barking orders and juggling chaos with the finesse of a circus performer on a caffeine binge. "Hal," Thane called, "any chance you can make their day worse?" "Initiating electronic countermeasures," HAL replied. "Their systems will find themselves at odds with reality." The AI intervention added to the confusion, leaving Zyll'ra ships stumbling through space like drunks at last call. It was almost enough to make Thane believe in miracles. "Lex," Thane said, turning to the administrator, "get our people ready to move. If this works, we'll have a window to push them back." "Understood," Lex replied, his expression a blend of determination and exhaustion. "I'll rally the colonists." The battle raged on, a symphony of destruction that echoed through the cosmos. For every Zyll'ra ship that faltered, a human cheer went up, a defiant cry that cut through the void. Thane watched it all unfold, clinging to the fragile hope that this gamble would pay off. They'd come too far to let it all end in failure. "Keep it up, team," he urged, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. "Let's show these bastards what we're made of." As the battle reached its fever pitch, Thane found himself at the center of the storm, balancing on the knife's edge between victory and defeat. It was madness, pure and simple, but it was also exhilarating in a twisted sort of way. "Hal, status report," Thane demanded, eyes fixed on the display. "Zyll'ra forces are in disarray," HAL replied with clinical precision. "Their countermeasures are failing." "Then let's finish this," Thane declared, his voice a rallying cry that echoed through the ship. The Resolute surged forward, leading the charge against the beleaguered enemy. It was a desperate gambit, the kind that only worked in stories and underdog victories. But damn it, if they were going to go down, they'd go down swinging. Outside, the tide began to turn. Human forces pressed the advantage, pushing the Zyll'ra back, clawing for every inch of ground with a ferocity that spoke of desperation and determination in equal measure. "Vex Cade status?" Thane asked, his heart in his throat. "Making progress," Vex replied, her voice crackling with static and adrenaline. "Turning these bastards into space debris," Cade added, his tone triumphant. "Keep going," Thane urged. "We're almost there." The battle was a maelstrom, a fever dream of fire and fury that threatened to consume them all. But in the heart of the storm, humanity found its footing, stubbornly refusing to go quietly into oblivion. "Captain," Lex's voice cut through the chaos, "we're pushing them back. It's working." Thane allowed himself a brief, fleeting smile. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they were on their way. And in a universe that seemed hell-bent on wiping them out, that was a victory in itself. "All right, team," Thane said, his voice steady and sure, "let's finish this and go home." As the final stages of the battle unfolded, Thane held onto the hope they'd found, a spark in the darkness that promised a brighter future. They were fighting for more than just survival now. They were fighting for a chance to live, to thrive, to remind the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. And as the echoes of battle rang through space, Thane knew they'd done the impossible. They'd taken on the Zyll'ra, and against all odds they'd fought back. Thane Corrigan stabbed an impatient finger into the holographic display, watching the red blips of Zyll'ra ships explode like fireworks on a national holiday, or a funeral procession, depending on which side you were on. His mood was balanced precariously between smug satisfaction and the grim understanding that the day was far from over. "Hal, what's the current state of our overzealous friends?" Thane asked, a smirk tugging at his lips. "They appear to be in the throes of a full-blown existential crisis," HAL replied in his usual monotone. "Their systems are malfunctioning and command protocols are in disarray. Just like my first marriage," Thane muttered, drawing a confused glance from Lex, who had wandered over looking like a man who'd found a winning lottery ticket in a burning building. "The chaos is spreading," Lex noted, rubbing his brow as if trying to erase the permanent worry lines etched there. "But they'll regroup eventually. We need to press our advantage." "Way ahead of you, Lex," Thane responded, directing his crew. "Vex Cade, hit them where it hurts. I want to see them cry." "On it, boss," Vex replied, her tone as sharp as the blade she kept strapped to her thigh. "Cade, you ready to make some noise?" "Always," Cade answered. "If it ain't loud, it ain't fun." Outside, the void was filled with the frantic dance of ships, the humans weaving through Zyll'ra ranks like wolves among sheep. The Zyll'ra ships, usually so precise and mechanical, now spun and faltered, their movements stuttering in the wake of the unexpected subspace disruption. Vex, suited up and brimming with the kind of determination that could put a hole in a mountain, sprinted through the halls of the Resolute. She paused briefly at an airlock, checking the beacon strapped to her chest. It pulsed reassuringly, or as reassuringly as something built from scrap could. "Cade," Vex called over the comms as she prepared to launch, "if this goes sideways, tell Thane I always liked you better." "Noted," Cade replied. "And let's hope it doesn't come to that." Vex launched herself into space, the artificial gravity of the Resolute swapping places with the indifferent chill of the vacuum. Her target was another Zyll'ra relay station, one currently blinking erratically like a disco ball with low batteries. She glided through the darkness, the unsettling tranquility of space offset by the chaos unfolding around her. Explosions lit up the sky, casting eerie shadows that chased each other across her visor. "Approaching target," Vex reported, her breath fogging the glass with each exhale. In the distance, Cade orchestrated another series of explosions, each one a testament to his love for all things that went boom. Zyll'ra's ships scrambled, their attempts to re-establish communication thwarted by the jamming beacon's relentless pulse. "Vex, hurry it up," Thane's voice cut in, tinged with urgency. "We've got their attention, but it's only a matter of time before they adapt." "Almost there," she replied, her focus narrowing to the task at hand. With a deft motion, she secured the beacon to the relay station, the device locking into place with a satisfying click. "Beacon deployed." "Good," Thane acknowledged. "Now get back here. We're gonna need every hand we can muster for the final push." Vex twisted in space, angling her trajectory back towards the Resolute. The battlefield was a kaleidoscope of color and destruction, the humans' chaotic tactics a stark contrast to the Zyll'ra's typically regimented approach. This was no longer their fight. It was a brawl, and humans excelled at brawls. Back within the Resolute's makeshift war room, Thane paced like a caged tiger, his mind a cauldron of strategies and contingencies. He glanced at the holographic display, the faltering red blips a testament to their efforts. "Hal, any updates?" Thane asked, even though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Zyll'ra forces are still attempting to recalibrate," HAL replied. "Their command structure is fraying. You might say it's unraveling faster than an abandoned crochet project." "Who knew you'd have a knack for knitting metaphors?" Thane quipped. "I aim to please," HAL responded dryly. Lex, who'd been hunched over a terminal, turned to Thane. "The colonists are ready to push with us. They are eager, if a little terrified." Thane clapped him on the shoulder. "Tell them they've got this. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. This is about reclaiming a little respect, too." The next phase of the plan was about to commence, and Thane felt a knot of tension in his gut, the kind that only a potentially disastrous gamble could create. But this was what they'd signed up for, a chance to stick it to the Zyll'ra and prove that humans weren't just relics waiting for the galaxy to erase them. "All right, team," Thane announced, his voice resonating through the ship. "We've got them on the ropes. Let's go out there and remind them why you don't mess with the underdog." The Resolute surged forward, leading the charge with a reckless zeal that bordered on suicidal. But sometimes, suicide missions were the only kind worth attempting. Vex and Cade rejoined the fray, their ships weaving in and out of the enemy's formation. The Zyll'ra, caught off guard and scrambling, couldn't counter the relentless assault. It was all cunning and chaos, the kind of strategy that would give a tactician nightmares. As the battle raged, Thane kept a keen eye on the unfolding mayhem, barking orders and adjusting tactics with the finesse of a man who knew he had everything to lose. The colony's defenders fought with a ferocity that belied their dwindling resources, each strike infused with the knowledge that this was their moment. "Vex, Cade, you know the drill," Thane urged, his voice unwavering. "Keep them off balance. We need to maintain the pressure." "Copy that," Vex replied, her focus laser-sharp. She danced through the enemy ranks, her ship a blur of agility and firepower. "Consider it handled," Cade added, delighting in the chaos he'd helped create. His laughter, tinged with the kind of madness that battle brought out, crackled over the comms. The tide of battle was shifting, the once impenetrable Zyll'ra line now a series of fractured defenses. The humans pressed the advantage, their movements like a choreographed dance of destruction. Thane watched the spectacle unfold, his heart pounding in rhythm with the explosions that lit up the sky. They were doing it. Against all odds, they were pushing the Zyll'ra back, reclaiming a little corner of the galaxy for themselves. "Hal, what's the status on their remaining forces?" Thane asked, daring to hope. "Decimated," HAL replied, a note of satisfaction creeping into his usually bland tone. "Their fleet's cohesion is nearly non-existent." "Good. Keep it up," Thane responded, a grin breaking through the grim determination etched on his face. Lex, standing beside him, allowed himself a small smile. I think we might actually pull this off. Keep your fingers crossed, Thane advised, his gaze locked on the display. It's not over until we've sent them packing. The battle stretched on, each moment an eternity in the crucible of conflict. But the tide had turned, and for the first time in what felt like forever, humanity was on the offensive, their spirit refusing to be quashed. As the Zyll'ra forces continued to falter, Thane felt a surge of pride for his crew, for the colonists, for the tenacity that had brought them this far. They'd faced down an empire, and against all odds they'd fought back. "Let's drive them out," Thane declared, his voice a rallying cry that echoed through the ship. "Let's show these bastards what it means to be human." In the chaos of battle, amidst the cacophony of destruction and the desperate struggle for survival, Thane found himself grinning like a madman. They were doing it. They were actually doing it. And as the last of the Zyll'ra ships retreated, their tails metaphorically between their legs, the realization struck him like a lightning bolt. They'd won. Against all odds, they'd pushed back the tide. "Mission accomplished," HAL intoned as the final blip faded from the screen. "Congratulations, Captain." Thane leaned back, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Victory was theirs for now. They dealt a blow to the Zyll'ra, a reminder that humanity wasn't extinct yet. "All right, team," Thane said, his voice filled with a rare note of joy. "Let's head home." And as the Resolute began its journey back, the taste of victory fresh on their tongues, Thane knew that this was just the beginning. They'd proven themselves today, and in a galaxy that seemed intent on erasing them, that was no small feat. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for the first time in a long time, they had hope. And in the vast, indifferent expanse of the universe, hope was a powerful thing indeed. As the last Zyll'ra ship slunk off into the void, probably to lick its wounds and fill out the appropriate forms in triplicate, the humans aboard the Resolute finally allowed themselves a moment to breathe. The command center was alive with the chatter of exhausted but exhilarated crew members, each one basking in the glow of the improbable victory like it was a sunbeam in the middle of a black hole. Thane Corrigan, his boots scuffing the deck as he paced, wore an expression that was half smug satisfaction, half "what the hell do we do now?" A look he'd perfected over years of doing things that, on paper, really shouldn't have worked. "Well, that was something," Cade Holt said, leaning back in his chair with the kind of casual air that came from knowing you just pulled off a miracle. "If they weren't so busy being genocidal maniacs, I'd almost feel sorry for them." "Almost," Mara Vex agreed, her perpetual smirk even more pronounced than usual. She flicked something off her sleeve, like victory had left a tangible residue she needed to brush away. "But in the end, they still tried to wipe us out, so sympathy's in short supply." Outside, the battle-scarred remains of the Zyll'ra fleet drifted like cosmic junk, a reminder that even the universe's most efficient bureaucrats could be undone by a bit of human chaos. Inside the Resolute, however, the air felt fresher than it had in months, or maybe that was just the brief respite from the recycled despair they'd been breathing. How are we looking?" Thane asked, knowing full well the answer would likely come wrapped in a layer of sarcasm thicker than the hull plating. "Systems are stable," HAL replied, his voice as dry as a desert. "Well, stable for a ship held together by duct tape and hope. Repairs are underway, although replacement parts are about as common as coffee on this ship." Thane grimaced. Coffee had been the fuel that kept humanity running, and unfortunately, their supply of the sacred bean had dwindled to levels that would make a caffeine addict cry. It was just one more thing to add to the list of post-battle concerns. "Speaking of coffee," Vex said, tossing her helmet onto a console like she was discarding a bad habit, "maybe it's time we start trading with someone who doesn't think our existence is an error in the universal spreadsheet." "Trading? You think there's anyone left who'd swap goods with us instead of just shooting first?" Cade asked, though his eyes held the spark of hope that hadn't been extinguished, despite everything. "Possibly," Thane mused. "I mean, now that we've shown we can kick some serious galactic ass, there might be others out there willing to cut a deal instead of a throat." That's a lot of mights and maybes, Lex interjected, arms folded as he leaned against the doorway. The administrator-turned-reluctant warrior seemed more relaxed now, like someone who'd just found out they weren't going to be fired. Or, in this case, atomized. But hey, if nothing else, I've heard desperation is a fantastic bargaining tool. Desperation, and the ability to screw with their tech, Thane added, eyeing the holographic display where the Zyll'ra blips had finally stopped flickering. Seems like we've got ourselves a ticket to a bigger dance. The idea of forming alliances with other oppressed species wasn't new, just previously unthinkable. But now, having struck a blow to the Zyll'ra, humanity had proven they weren't just space dust waiting to be swept away. We'll need to put out feelers, Thane continued, his mind already leaping ahead to the logistics of such a venture. Find anyone who's pissed off at the Zyll'ra and see if they want to join the We Hate Being Assimilated club. Sounds like a plan, Cade agreed with a nod. And hey, if it works out, maybe we can finally get that coffee, or booze, I'm not picky. Either would be a win, Vex said, stretching with a wince. But first, I need a nap. Being a hero is exhausting. With the immediate threat gone, the Resolute's crew turned their attention to patching up both the ship and themselves. The command center buzzed with the energy of people who had forgotten what hope felt like and were now trying to remember how it worked. All right, let's see what we can patch up, both in here and out there, Thane ordered, gesturing to the map where new territories sat open for negotiation. It's high time humanity got a seat at the galactic table without someone trying to flip it over. As the crew dispersed to their various tasks, many with wry comments about what they'd do with their newly liberated time, Thane couldn't help but feel a strange sense of optimism. For the first time in what felt like forever, they weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for a future. Thane, Lex called out, lingering as the others filed out. What if this is just a temporary reprieve? What if they regroup and come back stronger? Thane shrugged, a small, defiant grin pulling at his lips. Then we hit them again, Lex. Harder. Until they get the message. And what if they don't? Then we keep fighting, Thane said, his tone a blend of determination and the kind of dark humor that had kept him sane through countless battles. Because that's what humans do. We're stubborn like that. Lex nodded, the worry lines on his face softening ever so slightly. Well, here's to being a pain in their ass for a little longer then. Cheers to that, Thane clapped him on the back, already considering the possibilities. They had a lot of work to do, but for the first time in ages, they had options. Asterisk over the following days, the Resolute became a hive of activity, with repairs underway and new plans being hatched. Rumors buzzed around like particularly persistent flies, and the crew, despite their exhaustion, seemed invigorated. Thane found himself juggling a dozen tasks at once, from coordinating with the colony to drafting messages to potential allies. It was a far cry from the simple life of a space smuggler he'd once led, but then again, simplicity was overrated. Captain, HAL voice interrupted Thane's thoughts as he studied star charts on the bridge. Incoming transmission from a previously unknown frequency. It seems friendly. Define friendly, Thane said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Because my definition and the universe's seem to differ. Friendly in the sense that they're not currently shooting at us, HAL clarified, a digital smirk evident in his tone. Put them through, Thane ordered, curious despite himself. The display flickered and a new face appeared, an alien with features like a disgruntled squid who'd just been told it couldn't attend the party. This is Captain Thane Corrigan of the Resolute, he said, adopting the kind of diplomatic tone he'd learned from years of getting out of sticky situations. To whom am I speaking? I am Vond, representative of the Free Galactic Alliance, the alien replied, its voice like a swarm of bees attempting to harmonize. We have heard of your recent exploits against the Zyll'ra. Oh, exploits is it? Thane chuckled. I like the sound of that. We would like to propose an alliance, Vond continued, ignoring the jest. Your actions have inspired others and we believe together we can. How do you humans say it? Put a wrench in their cogs, Thane grinned. I like the way you think, Vaughn. Let's discuss terms then. I'm sure we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. As they began to outline the potential alliance, Thane couldn't help but think about how far they'd come. From a ragtag crew just trying to scrape by, to diplomats negotiating the future of their species. It was a heady feeling, and not one he'd expected when he'd signed up to fly through space. Captain, HAL interjected once the call ended, it seems you've become quite the galactic celebrity. Yeah, well, Thane shrugged. If I have to be famous for something, it might as well be for sticking it to the Zyll'ra. With new alliances forming and the galaxy opening up in ways they'd never anticipated, Thane knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with peril. But they had a real chance, to carve out a place for humanity among the stars. And as the Resolute cruised through the void, the crew working tirelessly to secure their newfound future, Thane allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. They'd proven that they could fight back, that they could endure, and maybe, just maybe, they could thrive. The galaxy was vast, often indifferent, and occasionally downright hostile. But for the first time they had a say in their destiny, and if there was one thing Thane Corrigan was sure of, it was that humans were nothing if not tenacious. Onward, Hal, Thane said, staring out into the endless expanse. Let's see what trouble we can get into next. And as the Resolute sailed toward the future, its crew ready for whatever came next, they knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't go quietly. Not now, not ever. They'd make damn sure of it.